There's a difference between an Article 9 fund and an impact fund that I find hard to grasp. Finally, can an Article 9 fund be an impact fund or not?
Well, Anne-Sophie is the impact fund specialist on the team, so if you don't mind, Anne-Sophie, I'll leave the answer to you.
Yes, that's a very good question because, in fact, there's a lot of confusion between Article 9 funds and impact funds. It's normal to make the confusion, but for all that, Article 9 funds and impact funds have nothing to do with each other. They are two very different things. An Article 9 fund is one that is regulated by the SFDR, as you and everyone else know. An impact fund is not regulated. It corresponds to a market philosophy, an investment philosophy, a market practice, which is defined by certain organizations, but which is not regulated. So that's important. Having said that, impact funds, to be impact funds, have to respect three important characteristics. I'm sure you know what they are.
Yes, intentionality,
Here they are.
additionality, measurability.
Exactly. So what do these three things mean? Perhaps we can start with the first, which is intentionality. Intentionality means investing in a company whose objective is to have an impact. In other words, in its business model, it seeks to have an impact before generating a financial return.
For example, a company that depollutes the ocean fits this first criteria because the company's very business model is to generate a major positive impact on the little addressed subject, in our case, ocean pollution cleanup.
Exactly. The second characteristic is additionality. Additionality means two things. First, for the company, that is for the investment itself. The company must bring a new solution to the market and therefore have a positive social or environmental impact. So it has to provide a solution. This is additionality at the level of the company in which the impact fund invests. And then there's a second aspect to additionality, namely the additionality of the fund. The first component is capital flexibility, that is, I take the time to invest and let the company have an impact before exiting my investment. And the second aspect for a fund is expertise. And the second aspect for a fund is to have expertise, that is a management team capable of generating impact through investment and at the same time generating a financial return. And that's expertise.
Yes, absolutely. And this aspect of additionality also counts for the investor, for the fund or the management company, which must also have company-specific expertise and support the company in its ambition to make a positive impact.
Exactly. And finally, the third characteristic is measurability. And here the idea is to be able to measure all the aspects mentioned above, that is additionality and intentionality. And in particular, we measure it with indicators, that is impact KPIs, that can track and quantify the fund's impact.
And there are a number of funds that can be cited as examples, most of which you know, so perhaps we could have a little competition, but I'll jump right in. Maif Impact, Citizen Capital, Racine Carré, managed by KREA and Make Sense, for example. Mutual Impact, managed by Xange, and Investor & Co., Morova's Land Degradation Neutrality Fund.
Yes, Positive Invest from Archaea.
To conclude on this subject, an Article 9 fund is a regulated fund, whereas an impact fund corresponds to a market practice. The term Article 9 is more recent, having been coined in connection with the famous SFDR with which you are all familiar, which in fact requires certain categories of companies to take sustainability into account in their investments, and therefore to publish all policies and all the procedure associated with the consideration of sustainability in their investments. So it would be, for example, obviously the sustainable investment policy, the remuneration policy, the risk management policy, and so on.
Very good. But in other words, an impact fund can be an Article 9 fund if it decides to apply all the regulatory constraints to itself. And conversely, what I also understand is that a new article fund may or may not be an impact fund. But the most surprising thing about all this is that an impact fund may not be Article 9. It is almost shocking.
This seems absurd.
Yes, this seems absurd, but there are impact funds that are not Article 9. How can we explain that? Because they don't want to go through all the SFDR formalities that can sometimes be burdensome or be perceived as burdensome. But having said that, being an impact fund that isn't Article 9 can be an obstacle when it comes to raising funds.
Yes, it does. So an impact fund, put in another way, may not want to be an Article 9 fund, correct?
Exactly. That is it.
Yes, because some investors, in particular institutional investors, have objectives when it comes to investing in Article 9 funds.